Okay, Kenzie, I'm excited for this first question.
All right.
You signed up with DLDNation for blank, and what you ended up getting was blank.
So I signed up back in May of 2020, and I had kind of been following DLD, Dela, like you, since probably October 2019. And then the classic COVID hit, and then I partied with it because I was off work and it was like a vacation. And then the 2 week vacation turned into a 2 month where I was ordering Uber Eats all the time and just not taking care of myself. And I started to reevaluate, maybe I should sign up. And I have a background in medical sciences, and so I always saw these influencers that would be doing these kitschy little things, or not really teaching the root of why to do it, and just saying, do this and trust me, don't, here's no evidence. And I loved all of Dela's content and DLD content because it made sense. I couldn't poke holes in it. I couldn't find faults. And so when I was like, you know what, I would really I could invest in my health. I want to step up my game. Obviously, what I've been doing up to this point hasn't worked, or if it did work, it was temporary. So let's try this out. I have a ton of extra time on my hands. Let's do it. And so, of course, I was just thinking this is going to be a really good, evidence-based fitness journey. And fitness in my brain before that was physical. I'd like to lose some weight, maybe learn how to get better at lifting in the gym. And let's just do that. Then pretty much, I'm 2.5 years later. I've had a lot of things happen. I am very, very glad that I had DLD in my corner, because I'm not sure how I would have gotten through some of the things without having built the foundations I did. But my biggest takeaway hasn't been weight loss. It's been, and I did a little client video a little while ago, and I was like, what are all the things I've gained? I thought I was going to come into this and lose weight, lose body mass. But instead I gained confidence. I gained mental and emotional intelligence. I gained being able to take up space and embracing being strong, and true confidence, not the fake it until you make it confidence. So there's just so much past becoming smaller, and becoming smaller is just not even on my brain anymore. And so all that, but I could talk hours about all the things other than losing weight.
Well, hey, that's why we have you on the show, and why I was so excited to connect with you for this, because for our audience, Kenzie is an OG. Like she said, she joined DLDNation in May of 2020, which it all runs together. And I just know that you've attended our mindset support calls that we have for free every week. And you've been attending pretty much every one weekly for the last 2.5 years. And it's just wild when you actually put a date on it and you're like, yeah, that was May 2020. So one, I appreciate you signing up with us over a period of everyone's life that was batshit. And then also I really appreciate the cosign from a healthcare professional, and seeing what we were trying to do and providing evidence-based knowledge and guidance for really how to become our best selves. Because I agree with you, Kenzie, so many people, and I talk about this all the time, you've heard me ad nauseum probably on mindset, but we all start with the whole I want to look great for this wedding, or the summer 6 months from now, I want to actually take off my shirt and not care. And what we actually find is so much more. And you are such a shining example of that, in my opinion. That's why I wanted to have you on the show, as Kenzie does some fun little, I do that thing too, where you bring your hand up to your chin. But I think what was really profound is you said you came in looking to get smaller, and you ended up getting bigger in all of these areas. And one thing, and I really appreciate you like having fun with me in that answer when you said there were certain things that you were looking for that you still got, like the lifting in the gym. So for instance, and I know you're on an injury recovery journey right now, which we'll get into, but for instance, like give me like your deadlift. Like what do you deadlift regularly, like 4 reps?
For reps, like 270 conventional for like 8 reps, three
I just
sets
want
of
to
eight,
give I want to give people a moment, take that in. 270 for reps.
which
Um,
I'd never deadlifted before DLD.
right.
That
And
was
so
the
not
classic, it's scary, people get hurt, and it's not worth it.
did you have that if I touch the barbell, I'm gonna balloon up and look like a huge muscle bound like bodybuilder? Was that in there?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I've always been into lifting. A little fun fact: I set the bench record as a freshman in high school.
Solid.
Um, so I was always naturally strong, and I've always naturally had a lot of muscle mass. Um, and I never really embraced that. I never loved that. I just wanted to be smaller. Like I saw my muscles as making clothes hard to fit on me, and not as a cool ability, like something really unique, something that people work really hard for.
This is kind of a curveball, but do you know where that came from? Do you think like I'll give you the easy answer, which is the social society in which we live, like our
The
culture.
man.
Yeah. Was it that or like because I know you've done a lot of inner work.
Mhm.
Was it that simply or was it something else?
I mean, partially. So a lot of it is the society of like a girl isn't strong, and if I'm really strong, then guys are going to be intimidated by me, and then they won't like me. And so it was a lot of those kind of like pressures outwardly, and I didn't want to embrace that. I didn't want to be that. I was fighting against what naturally is me, is a huge part of me.
And once you embraced it, you started to not only gain more confidence, and this was like symptomatic of it, gaining the confidence is lifting more, progressing, like pushing yourself, seeing what you're capable of.
Yeah, pretty much to the point where my coach Maddie a little while ago, when I was able to go to the gym all the time, had to tell me like, hey, you can't max out on every single lift, on every single set. Like that's not that's a lot of stress on your body. And I was like, but I like to go to failure every time. Like I like to see how far I can push. I'm at the point where if I see a guy next to me lifting more than me, like I should be lifting more than him. I don't care how much bigger he is. I don't care about that. Like I want to lift more than him. I want to pick up a dumbbell and make him be intimidated by me.
I was laughing because that's basically me. And Dayla
Yeah.
has to tell me, she told me for a while. And then on our fertility journey, our friend Sam Miller, shout out to Sam, was like, you should probably back it down to like 4 days a week and not go for broke every single day. Cause I would definitely have symptoms of overtraining. So when you're healthy, you and I will have a very like get down to Austin or I'll go up there and we'll get a very healthy, like go for broke lift because it's the one
Yes.
time we do it in forever. One of the many reasons I'm excited to have you on, Kenzie, is your journey is a little different than other clients that I've had on the show and sharing theirs. And most of the time it's fitness related. And yes, we do get into some of the mindset wins, some of the personal, career, professional, social, relationship wins. But with you, so much has been mindset. And so I kind of want to set the stage for this a little bit. And I know, and as long as you're okay doing this, would you mind giving me a rundown of the challenges that you've faced over the last 2.5 years, some things that stand out?
um, so the first year with DLD, I mean, I started nursing school, which was part of why I signed up, is because I wanted to go into nursing school. And any type of school journey, a lot of people end up gaining weight naturally, but like nursing school is pretty notorious for like it breaks you emotionally, it breaks you mentally, like you gain a bunch of weight. Like we're all going into healthcare, but then we come out unhealthy. And so I was like, I'm gonna get fit during nursing school. When in reality, thank God, I had a year to lay the foundations and to become more well-rounded as a human. Because my first year in nursing school was not too bad. School was hard. It was stressful, of course, but that was really the only thing that was a big thing in my life. And then about a year ago, almost exactly now, I started having like just getting hit over and over. The proverbial, one of your recent podcasts, you're talking about like the waves coming, the waves. And like, I had my first big one was my grandpa got like terminally diagnosed. And since I'm the only person in my family in healthcare, I was very much the point of contact, the person who interpreted everything for everyone. And I was glad to be able to do that, but it's a lot. And I was in nursing school still. And then he ended up only living for like another month and a half. And so I had him die. And then my relationship with my boyfriend at the time wasn't super great. So on top of that, it's the winter season and I like the sun and I like being outdoors, and being in the wintertime isn't as great. And then let's see, my grandma got sick pretty quickly after that. She ended up dying in like April. And then it was also the last year of my nursing school, and like everything was happening very fast. And I needed to get ready to be able to hit the ground running with being a nurse. And then um, I
Also,
and
just to
yeah,
interject, being a nurse amid like COVID recovery, right?
yeah,
It
yeah.
wasn't like, oh, it's hey, it's cool to be a nurse. It was like you're not only training for, but then entering like a war
Hmm.
zone, basically. And so it wasn't
Yeah,
just this chill, let me start my job. It was like, okay, I'm gonna step in and like COVID's still a thing.
right. And I'd been working in the hospital since December of 2020. So like I caught the tail end of it, not what I would say the worst of it, but I was still there for a lot of the waves. And I had a couple of friends that were like put in mental hospitals because they were having such bad mental health. My brother was put into a hospital because of his poor mental health. My fun fact is I applied for my current job that I have now in the emergency room while I was in a hospital room with my brother. So, um, and then as soon as I graduated nursing school, like 2 weeks later, I finally broke up with my boyfriend. So that was a 4.5 year relationship. So like deaths, friends being hospitalized, becoming single again, going through that, like, and then now I was like on the up, and then my knee got blown out. So I've just had quite a few big things happen the past year.
Yeah, just a couple, I appreciate you sharing that, Kenzie, and like going through that, because I know it's challenging. You can't just like list this off, this Rolodex, when Sean asked for it, because you and I have talked about things at length on mindset support calls. And that's kind of what I'm getting to, because for our audience, they might be going like, oh my God, like, one, it's insane what this person has gone through in like a year and a half. And then two, like, why did Sean ask this question? Because, I feel for this person. But the reason why I asked it is, and I know the answer, but um, how have you been able to manage it all? Because through the fire and through the waves, I love that analogy. You've caught a couple, and you continue to take care of yourself. And like, how have you done that? Because for real, the challenges that you just listed off, a mortal being would be like, I'm out. Like, Kenzie exits the chat, right? And you stayed in the chat and you kept working on yourself. And so why is that? And yes, we can segue into a couple of the mindset hacks that you
Right.
mentioned really resonated with you, but basically like what helped you stay afloat, so to speak.
Yeah. So what, like kind of what I was saying earlier, is I did have a year of relatively not any huge things happening, where I got to lay the foundations. In check-ins every single week that I was doing with my coach, there's not only the classic, what are your macros, what's the weight, like, are you drinking your water, but there's also, how are you doing mentally, how are you doing emotionally, what's your stress level, like, what are your goals for this coming week, how can you compliment yourself, like, what did you do well in, and forcing myself every single week in those check-ins to reflect upon how I'm doing, what does this next week look like, what obstacles do I have coming, and what can I do to set myself up for the best possible situation, even if it's not success, if it's just surviving. Because there was a while there where I was like, I just need to keep my nose above water. I don't need my mouth above water even. Even if my snorkel is above the water, as long as I'm getting some sort of air, that is what my goal is. And so having a support system, having mindset calls weekly where I could come and be like, I am not well. And learning through all that process to open up, to be able to recognize my emotions, to be able to recognize that I'm going through struggle, to not fight against it, but kind of take it in and embrace it.
Because
And
typically you would, not
yeah.
to interject, but you had said typically you would kind of avoid it, which so many of
Oh,
us do, right?
yeah. No, I I had some really hard times when I did my undergraduate degree, and uh, actually pretty recently I started telling some of my really good friends that knew me back then. I'm like, yeah, did you know that like this happened to me back then? And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I literally told nobody. I didn't tell anyone. I pretended any big problem did not exist. I buried it. I ignored it. I diverted and did not address it. And look at where that got me. Like, I was anxiety ridden and I'd have panic attacks. And I've like not had panic attacks anymore, potentially because I address my issues as they come now. um, so that's all helped me immensely, learning that like I don't have to do it by myself, and that by admitting there's a problem doesn't make me weak, and that vulnerability isn't weakness. Like those have been just absolutely crucial in me being able to not be absolutely buried by these problems.
The big one is, well, a couple big ones. One is vulnerability. Like, Brene Brown. We've talked about
Oh
Brene
yeah.
Brown. Yeah, the power of vulnerability. If you're listening, definitely give that a Google, give it a YouTube. But we incorrectly think and assume, and this is like another saying that I love that I know you've heard me say, Kenzie, which is what's most personal is what's universal. So if we take those two things as fact, and it's really counter to what we think growing up, like I can't be vulnerable, I can't sort of show, I have to have this hard exterior, I can't show people what's up. But when we do that, now all of a sudden people care because dot 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 what's most personal is most universal. And I know from our mindset support calls together, there were times when you came and you were like, I'm having this issue, like very emotional, like what would y'all do? And you not only get the support from people being like, wow, like you're going through it, and like thank you for showing up and you're still here, and also, have you tried this or doing this, da, da, da. But there were also times where you'd come to mindset and you'd be like, I'm going through the proverbial shit right now, but dot dot dot, like I'm still hitting my macros, like I'm still working out, I'm still taking care of myself. And maybe in years past, when this would have happened, I would have walled up, I wouldn't have taken care of myself, and I would have just like thrown caution and my life to the wind and not really paid attention to those things. And that's what I know is so powerful about your story, because you're now able to shift seemingly into a mindset that more serves you. So, for instance, with your knee injury lately, like
Mm-hmm.
surprise, surprise for those listening, imagine you blow up your ACL. Your first inclination is probably not, how am I going to make it to the gym, or like, what are my workouts going to be? And I think it was like the same week you came to mindset and you're like, so yeah, I blew up my knee, dot, dot, dot. I still want to go to the gym. So like, what do you guys think? And we were like, hey, you can still do upper body. You can do one leg. There's some studies that if you work out one limb, the other limb's going to see more strength. And then all of a sudden you start tagging me in these stories where you're at the gym and you're like flexing and you have a huge cast on, or the everything, the big supports that college football players wear, and you're like, yeah, like I got a great upper body workout. So how do you, like, what's that process for you when you have something that's challenging happen in your life, Kenzie, and then you shift into something that better serves you?
Yeah. Um, so lately it's been a pretty much a repeat of this process, but so something happens, the hellfire raises up, and I because I still am, I mean, relatively, I've been on this planet 29 years now, and it's only the past 2.5 years that I started addressing mental and emotional things. So I'm still pretty new to it, all in all.
You're
And
becoming a Jedi, though,
yeah,
for real, from what
yeah,
I've seen.
I've worked very hard at it. But like when something big happens, good, bad, whatever, I have to take time to specifically check with myself. What am I feeling? And I try to flex the like neutral mindset or like neutral mentalities of not necessarily labeling being angry, being sad, being mad, being happy, joyous, like whatever. Not trying to label those like good versus bad, and just purely being like, what is Kenzie feeling right now? Is she frustrated? Is she pissed off that her knee just exploded? Like, yeah, I was pissed. And like, was I sad? I don't know if I was sad. I don't think I was sad. I was fearful of what it was going to mean, what looking forward, what it was going to mean. And so I'm able to sit with those and be like, okay, I've identified them. What am I going to do about them? Like, am I going to feel them? Like, yeah, I need to feel these. Like, it's not bad to feel these classically negative emotions. And I argue it's important to feel them, because if you bury them, we get back to how I used to be. And I really, really like the person I've become, not burying my emotions. So I felt the things, and then I usually give myself a little bit of time to like wallow and be in that. I call friends, and I'm a verbal processor. So I'm like, hey, I just need a rant. Like, I need to say how angry I am about this. And then I start making plans of like, okay, what am I going to do about it? I have options. I can self destruct, I can ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist. I can try to help myself given the situation. And I can even try to have some forethought of like, what can I learn from this? What am I going to gain from this? And for me, getting into the place of, okay, what can I do to set myself up for success? And what can I even learn from this is the biggest things that help me get through it. Because focusing on the things that I'm going to lose from it, like it's going to happen no matter what. Whatever's going to be will be. So why don't I make the best of the situation? Why don't I try to learn from it? Why don't I try to help myself the best possible?
I hope people listening were taking notes, because Kenzie just listed out a blueprint for what to happen when facing a challenging circumstance. It's feeling your feelings, being human for a second, and like Kenzie put it, like wallowing in it for a little bit, like leaning on friends and family. And then another favorite topic of mine, which is neutral thinking. And so, what Kenzie's getting at, and if you want to check out a book that talks about this at length, it's called It Takes What It Takes. And basically, neutral thinking is, for instance, with Kenzie's knee injury, of course, we all know very easy to go negative. Like you said, the first, which I thought was really profound, the first thing you were like, first option, self destruct. Like that's the first option, right? Because we are so used to that, I think, as humans. But we know that if we go negative, like that's not going to help anybody. And like you said, you've had the last 2.5 years of like, oh, I used to go immediately into self destruct. That wasn't really working for me. And so I've tried something else. It's working for me. So let me put that one on the shelf for a sec. And in situations of challenge, it's very challenging to go positive. And so then it's like, what's the answer? And what Kenzie's getting at is that neutral thinking of like, okay, what's next? Like, what's the next thing that I need to do to get back to my goal? And then also shifting the perspective into what can I learn from this? Like, why is this happening to me in a good way? And it actually leads to a question I was curious about, Kenzie. With the myriad challenges that you faced over the last year and a half, can you in hindsight look at some and be like, oh, I learned a lot from this, or like I can understand why this happened?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that I've gained from it is kind of putting like the the proof in the pudding of like I've built these things. I know what I should do when things are hard, and like, oh my gosh, things are hard. And so being able to really flex those coping mechanisms, and looking back now, I have a couple of friends that I've been friends with for almost a decade, and just this past 4 months or so, I've become so, so, so much closer to them because of the struggles I've been going through and because they've been going through a lot of struggles. We call each other more often. I'm getting more authentic relationships. I'm building this like beautiful building around myself of support systems and relationships and my job and my career. And I'm getting so much more satisfaction from it all. And I'm not sure if going through all those hard things would have forced me to get to a place of like really walking the walk and doing the things and reaching out to people and relying upon people. So it was very much a kind of a crucible experience of getting out all the little imperfections and learning like what is my happiest, what is my most authentic self, and then living in that.
The high scoring self on verbal exams that I've taken is very happy that you used Crucible just now. That was great. So have you noticed that while your internal has changed, your external has also changed? So over the last 2.5 years, your internal has gone from self-destruct into neutrals mindset. What can I learn from this? And then it sounds like you've also seen your external world change as well, or evolve, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like to point out, like, I am not Superwoman either, though.
Yet.
Yeah,
We're
not yet.
almost
I'm working
there.
at it. But when the first couple blows of all the issues the past year was going on, I went and I maintained my mental and emotional health, and I didn't completely fall apart there, but I gained most of the weight that I had lost over the past year back. And I kind of had a come to Jesus moment, if you will, after that, being like, I am not happy that I gained weight, but for me, losing weight is going to be so much easier than rebuilding my mental and emotional health. So if going through all that shit, all that happened was I gained some weight, that's a win. So now I'm kind of getting back into the cutting process. I was in maintenance, thank God, for most of the the hellfire that was the past year. And then I earned back my privilege of being able to go into a cut. And that so physically my actual body changed in a way that I didn't like, but mentally and emotionally I was able to stay intact
And not lose your proverbial shit and
right.
self-destruct, which I think is a good term for it. Also, friendly reminder for everybody listening, and I don't know if you know this stat, you probably do, but the average weight gain over COVID was 40 pounds.
No.
The average, meaning that there were
Wow.
people like over that, right? For the average American. My point being, when we go through stressful circumstances, we all kind of turn to food, and it's okay. It's symptomatic. However, when you get into a position like Kenzie's, you start to value that mental toughness maybe a little bit more, because you also know from your journey, you're like, hey, I know eventually when the storm subsides, like, yes, I've gained a little bit of weight, but I know how it's going to come off. And I've done that before. And then also I know I've heard you in the gym, you're like, oh, like I gained a little bit, but like, man, I'm pushing a lot of weight now because I have
Yeah.
like in the gym, because I have way more energy to do that. And so really prioritizing our mental health, sometimes over the physical, because we know we can get it back. And like, that's something right. In my book, starting with the mindset of it all, like I've had certain people be like, wow, it's super cool you start with mindset because ... like that's what helps everything else. And that's what I truly believe as well. And so like you said, you're like, hey, I still have an amazing job. I have an even better support group, and I can get back to the fitness side of things when I need to and when I have that time and have that bandwidth. I know you said that you aren't Superwoman yet, but I did want to highlight a moment that you had with a patient, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but during this challenging season of life that you've had, you also still worked in a hospital, and you relayed this amazing story where you were able to positively impact a patient under your care. Could you tell us that story?
I mean, can you give me a little bit more of
I
what
love it.
exactly
Which,
it
yeah,
was?
this is why I'm getting to the Superwoman one. It was like, uh I say this and Kenzie's like, yeah, which one, Sean? Like, which time do I
I
impact
don't
this
want to
person?
say which time, but like also.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, also like please share a ton of these because this is just like one that stands out. Like when you come to mindset support call for those listening. But it was, I think you had a patient and they were very much like, I think it was a male patient. They were very much like down on themselves for something, and you kind of like stayed with them maybe like overnight or for the long part of the day, and you
Yeah.
like talk to them and relate a lot
Okay.
of the stuff that's worked. Yeah, starting to, okay. I'm gonna let you
Yeah.
take it away.
So before I fully became a nurse, I was working in a different capacity where sometimes I would be pulled to go be a patient sitter, essentially. And patient sitters function in many different capacities, but this time it was I had to go sit in a room with someone who had just tried to commit suicide. And it was like a younger teenage guy. And your job is just to like sit there and make sure they don't do anything, that they don't hurt themselves. But he was really receptive to talking. He wanted to talk to me. And I'm not a registered therapist, I'm not a counselor, I don't have any degrees in that, but I have lived life, and I've been able to figure out some things on my own. And so it was just really impactful because he opened up and talked, and I pretty much just shared some of my experiences and how, you need to go through it sometimes, but it doesn't mean it's the end. Doesn't mean that like you can not get through hard things and that you can't rely on others. And I was like, this is what I've done. I don't know if it's going to resonate with you or not, but this is what my journey has been like. And he really afterwards was like, wow, like just if nothing else, thank you for listening. Thank you for being an ear for me. And I think that's what a lot of people, going back again to like just sharing and being open about your issues and your problems, is that for him, just being somebody to like talk to and to hear him and like really receive it was huge for him. And he was just like, thank you so much. Like, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to me. And I remember he would apologize all the time. Like, I'm so sorry I'm talking so much. And I was like, brother, I'm here. Like, I am sitting here. You talk all you want.
I really appreciate you sharing that story. And yes, this next question is very self-serving, but do you think you would have been able to assist this individual without joining DLDNation back in May of 2020?
I would have been pretty afraid. I probably would have tried, but it would have been so uncomfortable for me because, like I said, I was like, emotion who? Mental health what? Like I was so uncomfortable with emotion. And so if before doing all that work and having the experience of working on myself, I had had that situation, I probably would have been like, uh-huh, like, ooh, like, what's on TV? What's over there?
Yeah, distraction, which is like versus like, let me get into the weeds with
Mhm.
somebody, like, let me just turn on the TV and distract this individual. Versus like you said, like diving into it. I was talking about this on an earlier podcast recently. It's like the proverbial, you're afraid to look at your bank account.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God, like, oh, I can't look at that. And then because you don't want to see like how much or how little you have. And then you actually dive into it and you're like, oh, I'm spending way too much at Starbucks. Like, let me pull that back. Like, oh, I found money in the proverbial seat cushions. Like, I used to give that, I called it finance homework, that exercise to life coaching clients. And I'd be like, just pull up your past like 2 months of spending and tell me what you find out. And they would always come back with some money. And I was talking to a client a while back, but they had a finance coach, and the finance coach, she was like, oh yeah, I already did that. Or like, oh, my finance coach told me to do that, and told me that on average, her clients find $300 per month of like doing that. And so just using that as an analogy of like looking at the hard thing and being
Mhm.
okay with that, like bringing it back around to your wave analogy, which I think is so profound. It's going towards the wave. Like for anybody who's a big surfer, you're out in the water, like when the wave starts to build, the first maybe knee jerk is to run, to turn on the TV, to avoid it. But you're literally going against the current, like the water is going towards the wave. And then if you go towards the wave, you can get through it, you can get over it, maybe you can ride the thing. And I think it's
Yeah.
such a great analogy for life. in addition to the mental wins, Kenzie, that you've experienced, I know as you and I were trading some notes ahead of this episode, you've also found yourself in a healthier position. And we've talked about on previous episodes how just with the way that society is, how we might eat and take care of ourselves, that it's not unusual for women to lose their period. I had a conversation with our amazing coach Riza on the menstrual cycle and like how it shouldn't be this annoyance. And so I'm curious, what did you notice? Like, because I know the ending of this story, but I would love for you to tell it as well, because I want to highlight, like, yes, we have had the mental wins, but also sort of the physical wins you've seen as well.
Yeah, I've had so many physical wins. Like still. And one of the big things is that part of the reason I so unhealthily lost weight in the past is I had this notion that I am a special little snowflake unicorn, and I know other people should lose weight sustainably, but for me, I have hypothyroidism, I have PCOS. So those all are things that make it so much harder for me to lose weight. Therefore, I have to do it so much more extreme than anyone else. And I had never, since starting my period, had like a good, solid, regular period. Like that just didn't exist for me, and I didn't think it was possible. But then with DLD, focusing on my internal, external health, all the factors that go into it to reduce stress and to become actually healthy and not just like visibly appear healthy. Probably year and a half ago ish, I like had finally had 3 periods in a row that were like actually coming normally. And I had learned that that's a huge reflection for women of your internal health. If you are regularly ovulating, that means your body feels safe enough to go through the stress of a pregnancy, whether that's your goal or not. But and so I had that, and one of the reasons I came out of my cut is because my period started to get weird again. And then fast forwarding to now, I 2 months ago completely went off hormonal birth control. Just wasn't necessarily seeing any sort of huge problems with it, but I was like, hey, let's try it, because I do have these things in my past and these diagnoses that deal with hormones and everything. And I was nervous about it. For people who don't know, a lot of times when you come off hormonal birth control, it can be a very difficult time for your body to adjust afterwards. But luckily, I've been killing the game with stress management, and I got my period perfectly right after I came off of it. And I'm two periods in now after that. Both of them have been normal. Both of them have been nice and healthy and regular. And so I'm just like, it's this whole different gate you open up of this for like women's health, of like being excited about it. And it's so much more fun to be excited about your period and be working with it instead of against it.
Dude, also just like you said, Kenzie, a signifier of internal health.
Yeah.
And this is something I was talking about with Riza, but we kind of vilify periods.
Oh,
and we really need to look at them as like, oh, this is beautiful. Like your body's great. You know, you're doing fantastic. Like even, it's funny because Dayla and I have had so many, you know, just like fun moments around a period, whether it was me buying tampons for her or trying to diva cup, and we're like 100% comfortable with it. And she's always thanked me for being cool with it. And for whatever reason, I've been like, yeah, like it's a human thing. Like everybody does it. Like we all poop, you know, like why be freaked out by it? But even this weekend, and it's interesting that you said, Kenzie, that it's like this signifier of your body's ready, because with our IVF journey, Dayla's had to go like on again, off again, on again, off again with birth control. And when she comes off, that like after, you know, a failed transfer, which we've had a couple, unfortunately, our clinic will be like, well, let us know on your period, because that will be like a signifier of if your body's ready to go and like doing healthy. And so when we were at a wedding recently for her sister, we're at this, you know, little motel, and she all of a sudden like randomly had a period, because it was one of those where we were coming off of a cycle for IVF, and it was just like, I don't know, like it'll come. And we're in the bathroom, like I think we were like packing, like ready to go home, and I'm like packing my stuff. And she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like I got my period. And I'm like, why are you apologizing? And she's like,
Celebrate.
oh, it's like a lot of blood and stuff. I was like, oh, okay, blood. Like it's flowing through my veins as well. And it's just like, it's insane how ingrained that is, the perspective, negatively so, that we have around periods, and then trying to right the ship. And so I really appreciate you buying into that, trusting the process, and being like, yay, like my body's doing great. And using it as a signifier of like, okay, like this cut that I did a little while ago, like, okay, I need to skirt, like slow my roll with it, because I can use my period as a signifier of overall health. And like, that's where you've heard me say this before, but I wish men could experience a period just to experience what that would be like, because anytime men take birth control, they tap out. They're like, I can't do this.
Right.
But it would be cool if men had a similar, like every month, like this is how you're doing, like a signifier of health.
Indicator, you're doing well.
Yeah, like I try to go off of my fingernails and hair sometimes, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, if I'm cutting my fingernails recently, like, okay, that means I'm healthy. But it would be nice to have something like that. I did want to switch gears for a sec, because I think it'll sort of flip the script on what people expect. But you had a knee injury. You basically, your ACL blew up in addition to some other things. And how many times have you been making it to the gym? And like, can you work? And tell me a little bit about that, and like that journey to be able to do those things. Because again, a mere mortal would be like, I'm just kicking up and we were watching movies and I'm not doing anything. And you didn't do that.
Yeah. So I completely tore my ACL. I also like tore a meniscus, partially tore like 3 other ligaments, and I got like a little fracture as well.
This was also in like a Spartan race, and Kenzie was like leading the charge, like ahead of everybody. And then
yeah, I fell off an obstacle and had to get carted off the course. So I like really did a good job on it and injured the shit out of it. And during that process, kind of what I was saying earlier, I took my time to be mad, to be fearful of the future, to be frustrated. And then I was like leaning into another of the, like, one of my favorite things to lean upon is like the hero's journey, like being the main character of your own movie, and being like, all right, like, what if I look back a year from now, like, what would I want myself to do? Would I want myself to just be like, oh, poor me, sad, my knee got hurt, like, let's just like not try anymore? Or like, what can I do here? And I was like, okay, like I'm in a cut right now and I want to continue cutting. And my cut hadn't been going super fast either. And so I was like, I can lean into my nutrition. Like, I've been a little loosey goosey with my nutrition. For my job, I work in the ER as a nurse. So I am running all day long for 12 hours and I pick up extra time. So I'm like, steps are not a problem for me. I'm moving. And so now all of a sudden these steps, not so much of a thing I can get. And I've gotten to the point where I can walk around on it pretty darn well, despite everything. But I was like, okay, let's lean into nutrition. I can do upper body still. And luckily I have a long time of lifting under my belt where I know how to modify exercises where I don't need both legs for stability. And luckily my one leg that's carrying the team right now, she's super strong. She can deadlift a lot. So I don't need my other leg to pick up the slack necessarily. Like, I'm a strong woman and I can keep going through this. And so I kept doing that. And then a fun little thing that's been happening crazy is, since I've really started to dial in my nutrition and focus hard on that, I've been seeing the most consistent progress in my cut. Mind blown.
Tracking those macros.
I know, it's crazy. So since I've been more strict with that and really keeping myself accountable, and I've been lifting only twice a week, I haven't obviously I haven't done any cardio. um, and I've only been getting 6,000 steps average a week, coming off of like a very solid 10K a week. Um, and I've been having more scale progress than my entire cut combined the past like 3 weeks.
So if I had told you like 6 months ago, like, hey, Kenzie, you're about to blow out your knee, how do you think your fitness journey is going to go? You'd probably be like, oh man, it's all over the place. Versus, excuse me, the results that you just shared, that it really encouraged you to hit your macros, which I want to come back around to. And you're still going to the gym. You're still getting like 6K steps. So many of us have a hard time getting like 5K, and we're ambulatory and we have use of both legs. And so again, this is why I was really excited, if you're listening, to have Kenzie on, because she went through the litany of injuries she had to her knee. She's going to the gym like 2 to 3 times a week. She's hitting 5 to 6K steps. She's hitting her macros and she's losing weight. And so I love the control what you can control theme of that. And then also, this is going to put you in such an amazing position when you get healthy and when you rehab your leg and when you get back to it. You're going to be like, awesome. Like, you're probably going to weigh less. And so that's less pressure on your knees and your legs in general. And then now you're like, cool, probably going to be so grateful. Like, oh, I can make it to the gym 4 or 5 times a week if I want to. Oh, I'm hitting 10K steps. Like, this is so great. And that's going to even like reinforce your mindset. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
So on this journey back to when Sean was like 12, 13, I had a ton of acne. Growing up in Los Angeles, like people would make fun of me, right? Thankfully, I knew a lot of friends, so not a ton of people made fun of me, but it was something I was very aware of. And for whatever reason at that age, I was like, okay, well, what can I control? Because like I'm using every face wash under the sun. Like I can't figure this out. And so I was like, well, I'm a swimmer and I'm like pretty fit. And like I look at swimmers on the Olympics and like they're pretty fit, muscular. So like ergo, if I keep doing this, like I should be pretty fit, like at least into high school and college. So like, all right, keep swimming, Sean, and like maybe let's add in some like push-ups and stuff like that, which was like 8th grade. I got chicken pox the week of this really big meet in Southern California. It was the first time in my life I was ranked in the top 8 and everything. And it was going to be like Sean's coming out party. I got chicken pox at 14, which was weird. And then that summer, I like was like, I am so pissed that I'm going to do push-ups and sit-ups. We weren't really lifting then, but I was like, I'm gonna do push-ups and sit-ups every night and like go run and do extra stuff. And then the next meet came in the summer. I ended up winning like a couple events, and it was so wild, but it was only because I had that setback. And I was just like, I'm so upset that chickenpox took this away from me. Like I'm going to redouble my efforts and like control what I can control. And that's my point in this. The other thing was my teeth. Like for whatever reason, I was like, I can't control my face, but I can control my teeth. And so like I'll brush them, I'll floss them. And now I go into the dentist and they're always like, wow, this was so easy. Like, how did this happen? And I always go back to that. I'm like, for whatever reason, when I was like 12 or 13, I was just focusing on my teeth because my face looked fucked up. And fast forward to now, you're a little bit more aware than others because of mindset support, the challenges that Dayla and I have been through over the last like 8 to 12 weeks. And I finally just got so pissed that I was like, okay, what can I control? Like I can control training. I can control eating. I can control my mood and like how I treat people. And even if the storm's raging around me, like those will put me in a better position to succeed. And I know, like yourself, that if I can treat my body well, by the time I get out of this storm, I'm going to be in a much better spot physically. And so I just love that journey for you, how you're really controlling what you can control. And then you're going to be able to benefit, long term after you heal.
And Kenzie a year ago had really hard things happened and gained weight. And I'm thinking maybe this time I'm having hard things happen. And I'm like not only doing mental and emotional, but now I'm able to loop in the physical too. So like progress
status.
Yeah.
We're getting progress, not perfection, and comparing yourself to yourself. And like, wow, I'm handling this so much better than I would have a year ago. And you have like a use case of that too, which is neat.
Yeah. It's super cool looking at the progress and the work and seeing it come. But I mean, like I came to mindset after my knee and after being told I couldn't go to work, because it was a battle to get back into work. And I was like, I'm not used to me trying really hard and being told like, no, you can't do it. Like, you're not allowed to. Like, and so there's been a lot of like little micro things throughout all this of me, these ups and these downs. And I'm like, God, this is a roller coaster. But when I go to rank my stress every week in my check-ins, I'm like, I don't know, it was probably like a 2 or a 3. Like, I had one day that was really intense, and I went through it, and I cried on the phone, and then I woke up the next day and went back at it, and I didn't let it keep me down. So overall, like, the week's pretty good, and I just had like one minor breakdown, and then I moved past it. And like, old Kenzie would not have moved past it so quickly. She would not have rebounded from that quickly.
Really personifying the whole, it's not a bad day, it's just like a bad moment.
Yeah.
And starting to live that, which I love. Like Dayla and I recently, same thing, something happened and she was like, how's your day? And I was like, well, the last hour has really sucked, but like overall it's been great. And like, once I get out of this, things will get better. So I really appreciate you talking about that. Kenzie, you and I, before hitting record, I was like, we're going to have to do 2 episodes. So I'm going to sign you up for a second one. But as we get to the end of this episode, I do have a question that's, again, very self-serving, but I also ask this of every client that I have on. What would you say to somebody who's thinking about signing up with DLDNation?
I would, to be a little nerdy, reference the Emperor Palpatine, like, little meme of like the like, do it now. Like, that is what I think of, because it's insane how much you don't know that you're going to get out of it. And it is, I mean, end of the day, you got to put in the work. Like, like, paying for a coach isn't going to magically change everything for you. It's a lot of work, and it takes time, and it's not always perfect. And even if you and your like motivation versus discipline episode that you like just did, which I love, it's not about doing it at the right time. If they're thinking like, oh, well, right now it's not really great for me, like, there is no good time. And I've been really embracing that lately. Like, there is no perfect time. There's never, even if it's a better time than others, there's never going to be a perfect time. And I'd argue that if you're really having a hard time right now, it's the best time to sign up, because it's going to help you that much more. If you're already in a good place, it's pretty easy to do something. So get the extra support, get the extra community and the extra resources while you're struggling.
Thank you for that.
Do it.
It's like the Kermit. It's like the dark Kermit meme. Yeah. Also, are you okay sharing like your Instagram handle and stuff?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So for people who are going to follow Kenzie, Kenzie wears a lot of cool Star Wars inspired healthcare apparel. So definitely check that out. But yeah, what's your Instagram handle for people who want to connect with you, hype you up, learn more from you?
So it's like at KenzieKins, but KenzyKins. And so I don't necessarily post tons of like crazy content on my actual feed, but if you look at my stories, that's usually where I'm posting up the day-to-day things.
The really inspirational, motivational stuff. Like if you need a good kick in the butt on what you're able to do, if you do not have any injuries, definitely check out Kenzie's stories, because it hypes me up. Like I appreciate when you tag me. I try to reshare those because I'm like, it's like with COVID, like when gyms were taken away, I'm like, okay, cool. So can everybody like be cool with gyms when they come back and like really want to go, and not this like, oh, like I didn't feel like going. Cause I'm like, it's March of 2020. Like everybody feels like going. Right. And then now we get back to non-COVID world for the most part. And it's like, no, I don't know if I'm motivated to go to the gym. And so really holding on to those moments in time where we're like, wow, I really would have valued having that. And then having reminders like yourself to be like, oh, wow. Cause I guarantee you, like, I don't know have you had anyone come up to you in the gym and been like, yo, I dap you up. Like I see you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like hopping around, cause I went right after when I was like still in full crutches and everything. And then now I don't wear a brace day to day, but I wear it at the gym because I'm like carrying around dumbbells and stuff. Whether I should be, I'm not, it's fine. But yeah, I've had a couple of different people be like, hey, like that's badass. Like, that's so cool. Or like, hey, that's dedication.
My point is you're an inspiration. And so you sharing things on your stories, inspiring people like me, inspiring others through Instagram, but then you're getting people to the gym, because I do that. Like, I've definitely dapped up people who had a boot on or something around their knee and they're on crutches. And I'm like, yo, like, it's hard enough to get here on like when you're healthy. And now this person's like consistent here. So please know you're hyping me up, you're hyping Instagram up, and you're hyping people up at your gym.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, hey, Kenzie, I really appreciate you being on. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I guess I do podcasts now.
You really do. I was going to wait until we stop recording, but I don't know. I was going to joke, like, do you do podcasts in your free time? This is like a side hustle that we didn't know about. And you're like, surprise, Sean, I have a podcast of my own. I'll have you on. It's episode 500.
No, I think I just like talking.
All right, guys. Well, if you're listening, we're going to set Kenzie up with a podcast. She's going to do this full time, but we'll definitely have you back for round 2.
Sounds great. Thanks.